Hello everyone, and thanks for joining today's What's New with AdX Policy training. I'm your trainer Asha Balendran, and I also have two policy specialists on the call with me today, and I have Kim and Elizabeth on the call. And they're going to be here to answer any specific policy questions you have at the end. Cool, so yeah, we have an exciting agenda for today. You may have joined a previous policy training, so you'll notice that this one's slightly different. So we're going to start off actually with a policy refresher. So anyone new to AdX, we're going to go through some quick points to cover the basic policies. Then we're going to go over the new policies that have recently been changed or added to AdX. And then we're going to move on to the ad review process and how we enforce them. We're going to go on to present a buyer case study, and that's to do with recent buyer audits that you might have come across. And then we'll be finishing with some tools and tips to help you with creative approvals. And as always, you can ask questions to myself, Kim, or Elizabeth via the question and answer panel. If you're new to Hangouts on Air, this is located on the left-hand navigation of your screen. So if you click the button that says Q&A, you can submit questions through that, and I will take them towards the end of the presentation. So feel free to submit them anytime you want. So our first section is policy refresh. So in this section, let's start by looking at the different types of AdX policies that exist. So we've broken them up into four main buckets here. You can see content and creatives, data and third-party ad serving, buyer participation, and behavioural. So these are four buckets that are easy to remember, and we're going to go through what each of them mean. So very briefly, content and creative policies describe what types of products you can or can't advertise on AdX, general specification requirements for your ad creatives, and website user experience requirements. Third-party ad serving and data policies note which technologies you're allowed to use and what you need to declare to us and what type of data you're allowed to collect. Buyer participation policies go over what types of companies buy on the ad exchange. And lastly, behavioural policies describe which internet-based advertisements, including remarketing, you can or can't use for targeting or data collection. Okay, so we're going to start with the content and creative bucket, and we're going to do a really quick refresher for anyone that's new. So one thing you'll notice, if anyone's familiar with AdWords, there'll be a theme throughout this training. So most of our policies are taken from AdWords, but there are slight differences, as you will notice throughout the training. So why is that the case? When we merged the two systems, that's Google Display Network, or GDN, and the DoubleClick Ad Exchange, we inherited many of the AdWords policies for buying on publisher partner sites. So with this, you will know that as a buyer on AdX, you have access to AdX publisher sites as well as AdSense publisher sites. So the first section in the content and creative bucket of policies is around product policies. So these policies dictate what you can or can't advertise on AdX, and we, in this scenario, we completely follow the GDN policies. If you're unfamiliar with AdWords, note that AdWords products are classified as either being family safe, non-family safe, or adult. But on AdX, we only allow family safe products. And one example, so on the right-hand column, you can see some examples there. So just calling out gambling ads, on the AdX, we consider that as non-family safe and therefore are not accepted on AdX. And other examples you can see include abortion, tobacco, weapons, and politics. Okay, so actually, what's worth mentioning, we'll cover this later on, but in the product section, we recently opened up a beta for alcohol ads, so I'm not sure if any of you guys are on that, but I'll go into more details on that one. And it's also worth noting for some of the content policies mentioned here, they only apply to open auction and not for preferred deals and private auctions, but I'll cover that later on as well. And if you want to read more about any of these in details, then there's always resources available. So I've added one there. And I'll let you know how to obtain this presentation afterwards, as well as the recording. Okay, so the next area within content and creative policies are general ad specifications. So these are simply requirements that your ads must comply with. For example, technical requirements, and some examples there which you probably are familiar with are length of animation, proper URL declaration, blank ads, and trick to click. So they're all the technical stuff behind the creative itself that you need to comply with. And then lastly, we have the web user experience. So another big part is the website the user actually lands on and what kind of experience the website provides. And at AdExchange, we want to make sure that it's not a suspicious site that is trying to take our users' information or, install something on their computer. So we also have the Google unwanted software policy to cover that. And the first thing related to landing page. So one example is when a user on the ad, they should have a good experience. There's a threefold criteria actually that we evaluate the landing page quality by. So one is relevance and original content, 2 is transparency and trustworthiness, and 3 is ease of navigation. So one big part of that bucket there is landing page quality. Other things can be, for example, supports of back buttons and non-intrusive pop-ups. Okay, so this is some new content here for anyone who has joined a policy training before. So we've taken 180 days worth of data, and we're presenting the most frequent policy violations within this content policy bucket. So the first one here listed is proper URL declaration. And the policy here is that you must serve the ad you serve to the page must lead to the URL you declared on the ad. And the main reason behind this is that publishers may need to block certain URLs or ads from their site. And if an advertiser can't declare this properly, it may violate the publisher's rules. So whenever you create an ad in our system, submit an ad tag or respond to a bid request, make sure you define the destination URL properly so publishers and Google know where the ad's leading to. So this is one of the top violations within content policies that we always see. So yeah, be wary of that one. The second one I wanted to call out, believe it or not, is gambling or pharma ads. This is clearly not allowed on the AdExchange at the moment, so we're still seeing quite a lot of ads in this category. The reason I've mentioned before, the status currently is non-family safe and therefore can't be run on the AdExchange. If you were interested in other categories and other statuses that we assign, there's a link there, so you can get more detail from that. Okay, so the third most frequently violated content policy is serving a blank third-party ad serving creative. So that's what 3PAS stands for. The policy states that each trafficked ad must contain a creative. Rendering blank ads is basically not acceptable on the AdExchange. And the reason why this policy is in place is because publishers obviously don't like seeing blank spaces on their sites, and additionally we can't make a call on additional content violations if there's no content to view. So yeah, that's a really big one to avoid. And then lastly, we have something called site not crawlable. So the ad is disapproved because the declared click-through URL leads to a landing page that couldn't be crawled. And later on, actually, we'll go through some use cases on how to avoid these violations. So if you're actually seeing these disapproval reasons, don't worry, we'll give you some tips on how to avoid them. Okay, so that was a quick run through of the first bucket. Next bucket I'm going to go through is data and third-party ad serving. So with these, we're trying to keep publishers assured that AdExchange is a regulated environment and give buyers access to leverage different tools. So we want to provide that safe and transparent ecosystem between all players of the AdExchange. So we also try to protect the end users as well, because we have a large responsibility to them to make sure that they're not exposed to technologies that might compromise their safety and their users' safety. All right, so to summarize the policies in this bucket, firstly, I wanted to just point out that the difference between AdWords and AdExchange is that AdX gives you access to inventory, typically using your in-house server, if you have one, or it allows you to access it via a certified third-party ad server that you're using. And in working with IAB, as all major network partners and technology providers do, we want all ad servers to be compliant with the best industry standards. And we obviously like to be confident that if a user wishes to opt out of an ad server or technology, that they have all the information and the ability to opt out. And at AdExchange, we encourage transparency from buyers and sellers. So we want to give sellers the insight into the technology that you, our buyers, are using. So I'm going to jump into the most frequently violated policies in this category. Again, this is 180 days past data. And the first one listed there notes that all third-party and fourth-party calls must be declared. So what this includes is redirects or server-to-server callouts, and redirects or callouts to any technology, including ad servers, rich media servers, tracking technologies, or verification technologies. So in terms of fourth-party calls, this is probably the biggest complaint from publishers, because vendors need to be specified, because publishers need transparency on the AdExchange. So the second one listed there, as you can see, is flash cookies and other locally shared objects. So I'll give you an example of why it's not allowed. So for example, say a flash banner is served and set as a locally stored object file. The banner writes the data about the page the user's on, the products displayed in the banner, and makes a backup of the user's web cookie data. So users cannot easily or transparently block the use of locally stored objects, and it's therefore against Google policies to gather ad serving data from an ad impression. The third one there is quite a severe policy violation, which is malware, and this is really straightforward. It's simply not accepted or tolerated within any Google product, and that's including AdExchange. So Google verifies any creatives directly uploaded to AdExchange or follows a third-party redirect for malware or viruses, and these violations are not accepted or tolerated. And I'm going to go through this later on, but they have a very severe enforcement. Basically, your account may be suspended immediately. So that one's yeah, quite a severe policy violation. The fourth policy listed there is click macros. So you may have come across this before, but it's required because we want to make sure we're providing the safest environment, and we have a requirement on AdX that you keep track of clicks. So you might be tracking clicks on your third-party system, that's fine, but we also ask that you pass the click event to AdExchange as well. So we're using that as a signal to detect fraud outside of the AdExchange or malicious usage of AdExchange. So one item that's not on the list there, it's not a top violating item, but it's creeping up, and it's something called cloaking. And this is where a website changes its content depending on the client, primarily used to show a crawler or a different page or a video than a normal page. And basically this contains some sort of malicious content. So yeah, that one's one to be aware of. It may creep up to be a top violation in this category. And a recommendation from one of our specialists actually is that if possible, buyers should have their own third-party tool in place to pick up malicious violations before it's even passed AdExchange. So for example, before it's even uploaded to the API. Because if there's a tracking set up before, then this will obviously decrease the chance of any account suspensions, any campaign pauses, and disapprovals. So yeah, that was a handy tip from one of our specialists. All right, so buyer participation. This is a really quick one. There's just one policy in this, and it's also known as our sub-syndication policy. And it basically just states that on AdExchange, you must have a direct contract and a direct seat on the AdX. Buyers should not be able to buy on behalf of other buyers. And why we have this rule in place: one, it's for transparency for publishers, so they know who's actually buying impressions from their site. It minimizes network-to-network redirects. Obviously, risk mitigation, so if a sub-buyer is violating any of our policies, then we don't have to suspend the main buyer or the DSP. And the other thing is that it's easier to report on deal activities by country and region if everyone has their own seat. So that was a short one there. So the next one I wanted to call out was the behavioral enforcement. Again, this is really straightforward as well. You basically can't use Google platform products to select or target interest-based advertisements, or use it to collect or use audience data such as like cookie lists. And you can't do them based on the following sensitive categories. These aren't all of them. To get the full list, you can access it via the link there. But just to call out a few, you can't use basically racial or ethnic information, religious beliefs, political affiliation, health or medical information, and so on. So if you are using remarketing, that is, if you're setting up remarketing campaigns or placing an AdExchange remarketing tag on your site, you need to comply with these interest-based advertising policies. This includes correctly declaring your use of remarketing in your own privacy policies, and you can do so via, you can read about that on the link there. And just to point out, here are the common examples of sensitive categories, but there are a few more. And just to point out, if you have any doubts in any of these policies or whether you're doing something right, feel free, if you have a managed account, to contact your account manager or solutions consultant, and they'll be able to confirm that with you. Okay, so that was the quick refresher on policies. We're going to now move on to the new policies that we wanted to bring your attention to. So as I mentioned, we opened up a beta for alcohol, which was, one of the main things that that was on demand that we do. So if you're not on the beta, you can reach out to your account manager or solutions consultant, or there's some information on our AdExchange Help Center on how to get started on that. So yeah, premium publishers, so 200 or more sites are enabled for alcohol ads at the moment. Again, there's seasonal opportunities, so this time of year provides a number of great opportunities to activate budgets with this new alcohol beta. And to get started, here are some simple steps, but I think there's more information on the Help Center. So you can update your bidder to target alcohol-enabled sites and then get certified. So the next new policy that I wanted to call out was a quick update to the preferred deals policy. And basically what's changing is that for one-to-one deals, so preferred deals or private auctions between AdX buyers and sellers, most ad exchange content policies, so the policies that I started the training off with, the ones that are specific to open auction won't apply. However, there are some policies like platform policies, like no malware, trick to click, they still will apply. And the reason for this is that because it's a one-to-one deal, publishers and buyers have a direct relationship. And so with the new features out, for example, publisher block overrides, publishers can control the policies and settings, block settings themselves. So this is just an easier way to, have relationships and make deals without the, disapprovals and violations. And yeah, that's what I mentioned before. So this is just a snapshot from the seller UI. So rather than, us enforcing the content policies for all open auction stuff, publishers have the control now to switch off blocks or put them on. So for publisher blocks, publishers can do that per deal today. And other blocks, like Google ones like blank ads and no border, this is for deals only. Publishers can quickly unblock that as well per deal. But other stuff, I'm going to cover the egregious violations later on. These blocks cannot be removed, whatever deal it is. Okay, so we have a new policy called 30-day snippet life. Essentially, to make our buyers happier by virtually eliminating stale snippets, we're extending the maximum age from 3 days to 30 days. And for example, today a snippet is only active if it's been used in the past 3 days. So otherwise, if it's been inactive for 3 days, it will be considered as stale. And the problem with this is that stale snippets are temporarily blocked from serving, and it's no longer scanned. So if a buyer starts rebidding with a stale snippet, it could take up to hours for the snippet to serve again. So essentially, this launch keeps an active snippet fresh for 30 days. Okay, so in-banner video filtering. So we're opening up in-banner video ads for publisher blocks. So by default, in-banner video ads will be disabled for all publishers, but now there'll be a new attribute available in the publisher controls UI, which you saw earlier, allowing publishers who want these ads to opt into them. Okay, so just to call out, creatives for OTC, which is over-the-counter brands, are allowed on the ad exchange. So approval for these types of brand advertisements are determined by landing page and the content of the creative. So landing pages with OTC brand advertisements will be acceptable as long as they don't contain prescription drug terms, or PDT, or link directly to an online pharmacy website. And the other one is that if the landing page of the creative contains PDT or directly links to the pharmacy website, then they will be disapproved, and the bid response you'll see will get filtered out of the auction. Now, this is not to be confused with online pharmaceutical products. These are not allowed on the ad exchange. So these include prescription drugs, online pharmacies, unapproved pharmaceutical supplements, other substances like steroids. So we just wanted to call this out because buyers were getting confused between the two. And yeah, one point to note is that the over-the-counter pharmaceutical ads, they're not allowed to serve in Japan, China, Russia, or Hong Kong at the moment. You can read about that if you want more detail via the hyperlink there. All right, moving on to the next agenda item. So we've covered the policy refresh, we've covered new policies this month. Now we're going to go through the ad review process and how we enforce them. So let's take a look at the ad review process. So we have a couple of things here. So for example, say you submit an ad via the REST API or via bidding. There are a couple of things that gets checked straight away via automatic ad review. Stuff like invalid protocols, raw IP addresses, incorrect technology declarations, flash cookies, malware, all the things that were listed which have severe enforcement models. And I'll go through that in a second. And a couple of things to note. So the ad review process has the automatic review, and then one question that we sometimes get is that paused ads don't go into review. So if you have an ad campaign that you want to go live in, say, 5 days, it's best to get those activated and reviewed in order to run before that. And also, if you edit an ad creative, it will go into the review again. So if you have an ad creative running and you edit the ad campaign, bear in mind that it will have to go through re-review to get approved again. And if you're a UI buyer, so you buy through the user interface, the ad will be labeled as either disapproved or approved in your account. And for disapproved ads, you'll actually get an email notification if you have it enabled, if you have that setting enabled on your account. And I think you can control that via the My Account tab. If you're an RTB buyer, on the other hand, you'll see the disapproval ads in either RTB Breakout, Creative Explorer, Creative REST API. And we'll talk more about those in a minute. Okay, so I mentioned this earlier. So these are something, this isn't a section on its own, like a bunch of policies. It's just the enforcement behind these policies. So they're called egregious violations. And these are items that, if we detect, they could result in a more severe enforcement rather than the previous policies that I've mentioned. And these could, for example, say, LSOs, flash cookies, malware, video cloaking, and so on. They can result in, your account being permanently terminated. So these are ones that, we want to avoid at all costs. Cool. Remember, if you have any questions on anything that I'm presenting, please do submit them via the Q&A box, and I'll go through those at the end. Right, so the next thing I wanted to cover was something that we've been doing recently, and it's called buyer audits. And in order to continue to provide access to high quality inventory available in AdExchange, we need to ensure our publishers, that you as our buyers are complying with all our policies. So to help us achieve this, we've been doing some proactive buyer audits. So just a bit more information on this. I'll present a real case study that we experienced in June. So these are, again, proactive messages that we'll reach out to you with, and basically there's something called a sort of violation badness score, and the current average is 0.1 to 1.9. So in June we flagged a buyer as having a 2.16 badness score, and this is categorized as high, and primarily it was for gambling disapprovals. So after the proactive health check message that we reached out with, This can be in the form of, your account manager or, just a health check message that you receive. The buyer's badness score went down from 2.16 to 0.94 in July, and then further down to 0.4 in August. And just to tie that into the number of disapprovals, that went down from 94% to 79% to 42% in August. And then to tie that in even more for you to relate with, in terms of the number of eligible snippets to run on the ad exchange, when the badness score was high at 2.16, the eligibility of snippets was 114. As the badness score went down, the eligibility went up. So it went up to 278, and now in August it was at 704. So, we ask you to comply to our policies, but we are also proactive in reaching out to you to ensure, your optimum performance on the ad exchange. Okay, so top 10 disapproval reasons on AdX from the past 180 days of data from September the 3rd. Number 1 is bad destination URL, and the site isn't crawlable. So I covered this before, and actually we've got a case study coming up, a use case that actually explains some techniques that you can do to avoid this. The next one is length of image animation. So there's a lot of violations on that. Incorrect destination URL declaration, blank ad creative, and gambling. So these are the top ones. The other ones I'll just call out so you're aware of them. Landing page quality disabled sites, media not fully functional, invalid fourth-party calls, problem with click macros, and undeclared restricted content. So these are the top violations, and we're just going to go through some real case studies now so that we can give you some tips to keep those disapprovals down. Okay, so these are our frequently asked questions from our buyers. The first one is, how do I check the status of my creatives? So we hear this time and time again, and we have, we've been making enhancements to our tools. So obviously this is potentially a new tool for some of you on the call today. It's called the Creative Explorer, and it can be found under the bidding tab in your user interface. And on the left-hand navigation, you select Creative Explorer. And this gives you a list of all of your creative IDs, the click-through URLs, and most importantly, the status. So you can go here and easily check what's approved, what's disapproved, and we also give you the reason. So here you can see in this example, the destination URL is not crawlable. So in the top 10 disapproval reasons, this was one of the main things that we're seeing. So hopefully now you know what you can use to identify the disapproval reason. And when you click into it, you can basically get more information on the creative itself. And yeah, so basically with Creative Explorer, you can check the approval status of your creatives and also drill down into a more detailed, granular level. Right, so another tool that you may be familiar with is RTB Breakout. So we've actually come a long way since it first launched late last year. There's been a lot of enhancements made to it, but what this actually does is shows you all the different filtering reasons for your bids. So you can see here under the filtered bids, it gives you all the different reasons why your bids were filtered out of auction. And what's good is that you can filter by creative ID, which in this case is very relevant. If we have specific creative IDs we want to check, but then you can also filter for publisher, preferred deal, private auction, and so on. So this is a really great tool if you haven't used it already. Okay, moving on to the second case study I have a creative disapproved for URL not crawlable. How do I go about troubleshooting that? So this is one of our main disapproval reasons. So we're just going to give you some, handy tips that you can use. So the reason why this gets flagged all the time is because the declared click-through URL leads to a landing page that could not be crawled by Google. And common crawl errors include robots.txt failures, DNS errors, or server errors. And so you're thinking, why is this, in place? Basically, the landing page of all ads on the Ad Exchange must be crawlable. And, this is in one of our policies. So the Ad Exchange uses Google crawlers to read and ensure that all landing pages comply with AdX policies. So how do we troubleshoot this? So to allow Google crawler on your page, you can add a user agent, adsbot-google, to your domain's robots.txt. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just do a search for robots.txt and it'll give you information on that. You can also use Google Webmaster Tools to see how to make your pages accessible to Google. So a couple of things there. And if your ad is disapproved because the landing page is not crawlable, you can correct it by ensuring that Google bots can crawl your site. Once you do that, you can resubmit your ad. Okay, so this goes nicely onto case study 3, which is my creative was disapproved. So say, for example, the URL crawlability issue, and now you've fixed it. How do I go about resubmitting it for approval? So what's the best practice on resubmitting your fixed creatives? So the highest recommendation is to use the Creative REST API. And you can use the Creative REST API to upload your creatives using the same account ID and buyer creative ID. So this is the best, quickest, most simple way, effective way to resubmit creatives. If you're not integrated with the REST API, then you can resubmit the creative using a new buyer creative ID. So as discussed, it's really important to get your creatives approved and reviewed prior to turning your campaign live or running your new creatives. So you can submit your creatives to the Creative REST API and then, check the status of them there. Right, so the next case study is how to check for SSL compliance. So as you know, this year we've been enforcing SSL compliancy on ads and callouts. So we have a couple of training videos on that if you wanted to learn more about that, but I'm sure everyone's well on their way to SSL compliancy by now. But in terms of tools to check, we have a new tool called the Creative Validator. And this is a really, really cool tool actually. All you do is pop your ad tag that you'd like scanning into the Creative Validator. This is actually found in the same place the Creative Explorer is found, under the bidding tab in the left hand on the top navigation. So you pop your ad tag into the tool, click scan, and the results will basically show the status of the SSL compliancy. So the status can either be compliant, partial, or not compliant. So in this example here, it says it's partially compliant, and then it gives you the, it highlights the non-SSL calls associated to the partial compliancy. So this is really handy. The other tool that you can use is, again, RTB Breakout, multi-use tool here. So if you actually check your filtering reasons, and you can see that a high number of bids are getting filtered, if you click into Rich Media Capability Non-SSL, you'll see all the creative IDs that have been filtered out of auction due to SSL. So that's the attribute there that you're looking for, Rich Media Capability Non-SSL. That means they were filtered out of auction due to non-SSL compliancy. Cool. So I've just put a summary of the tools there. I didn't mention actually the snippet status report. So for RTB buyers only, this is a report which provides information on whether a creative has been approved, and it helps you also debug serving problems as well. So I've put a link there in case you wanted to learn more on that one. Okay, so that was everything that I wanted covered. I'm now going to go to the Q&A panel and take some of your questions. So yeah, feel free to submit anything now. All right, so first question is from Piero, and he says, where can we see our buyer badness score?
So currently the badness score is internal only, but we are looking into whether we can release the score into some of the UIs that Asha just went through. So hopefully in the future you will be able to see your score. Probably the number itself won't mean much, but we can show kind of where you fall over the distribution of buyer badness. So currently internal only, but we are looking into how we can expose this so that buyers can easily check it themselves.
Great, thanks Kim.
Mm-hmm.
And we had another question from Alice who asks, did you say that political ads are not allowed on AdExchange?
Political ads are allowed on AdExchange. I think maybe it showed up when we were talking about remarketing. So I don't believe you're allowed to remarket based on political affiliation. But if you are just running political ads that aren't targeting specific users, then that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was one of the sensitive categories due to for remarketing purposes. But yeah, thanks Alice for that question, and thanks Kim for your help with that one. So I'll leave just 30 seconds for anyone else to submit your questions in while I do that. So some key takeaways. Please read through our policies and new policies to get familiar. So on our AdExchange Help Center, there's a guideline piece called Program Guidelines, and it's got a full list of our policies. So I've only touched upon some of them. And then also there's actually a cool section called Policy Updates. So you know, if you wanted to keep on top of those, and you don't want to wait for one of these trainings, you can actually access it via that Help Center article. The other thing to note is that ensure you're not violating the severe egregious violations, and these are all listed on the platform program policies link there. And we presented a couple of cool tools for you to use to check the statuses of your creatives. So Creative Explorer, RTB Breakout, Creative REST API. So those are all available to RTB buyers and UI buyers. So please do have a look there. Okay, so we had a question just in time from Luis, and he says gambling companies that have national licenses, for example, Spain can buy on AdExchange on that country where they have the valid license. I think he said, so I think what from understand is that does it vary country to country if the country has the license to advertise on some of these categories?
So today on AdX, all policies are global. We realize that certain countries, some things are allowed, other countries it's disallowed. Today the policies are global, so if it's disallowed in some places, it'll be disallowed across the board on AdX. Unfortunately, we don't have like geo-restricting abilities to just target specific countries. It's something that comes up quite a bit, but today everything is global.
Great, thanks so much, Kim. Good question, Luis. Okay, so yeah, thank you so much everyone for attending this training. I hope you found it really useful. And as I mentioned, this training is obviously recorded, so if you missed the start, you can tune in again via the training page. If you want to receive the presentation, then please send us feedback. I'll post that link onto the training page which you visited to start this training. So there'll be a short link there which you can submit your feedback, tell us, what you liked, what we can improve on, and then, you'll receive the presentation. So yeah, thanks so much everyone for joining. Thank you so much to Kim and Elizabeth for your time, and see you again on another training. Bye everyone.